Hello and welcome to Eye on Hong Kong. This is Harminder.
Hi, this is Key.
And this is the 12th episode of our podcast. And today we have a very special guest in studio today, and he is Evan Fowler, formerly of the House News. Of course, it's been in the news that House News had a sudden closure, and he's here today to just discuss his insight on it. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I think maybe just to sort of clarify, I was a contributor to House News,
an ex-columnist.
So I think occasional essayist, certainly with the length of some of the things I submitted, but I wasn't a staff member.
Okay.
With House.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into House News? Why you like to write articles? What you discussed?
Well, I think I was born and raised here, and Hong Kong is sort of very much my home. Actually, last year when my great grandmother passed away, I sort of realised that, I'm the fourth generation of my family who've considered Hong Kong, their home, and who have been, I guess, Hong Kong Yan
like Hong Kong Yan.
Yeah, like how I write. Yeah, I know.
So for me, I think Hong Kong, writing about Hong Kong was a very sort of natural thing to do. I mean, you're writing about your home, and certainly seeing changes in the home, seeing changes that have happened in the community. I mean, I think I felt obliged to write on that and to comment on that, and I did have a relatively unique perspective, because it's something I've occasionally talk about, but since 2007, I have actually been interviewing. At the moment there are 16 families from very different backgrounds on their life in Hong Kong, and I found that actually very insightful.
I actually heard from some local writers saying that House News, they're quite sticking their nose up because they don't really accept all these writers giving their articles to them. How come they found you?
Well, I was very lucky actually. I was invited to write. Honestly, I was invited to write before House actually got started. So when the founders of House actually sort of got together and the idea was really sort of pitched, I was one of the names which was bandied about. So I was very lucky. I mean, one thing which Tony would say was, even when it came to at the early stage, sort of deciding whether they wanted to go bilingual or whether they just wanted to go Cantonese. The whole bilingual thing was like, right, how do we accommodate Evan? And so I think I was fortunate to have been on the radar quite early. I mean, regarding sort of House's policy, House didn't have an editorial line. I mean, House was really open to anyone to write and to contribute their views. But obviously, what they did look at was whether someone could. I mean, you had two sides. You had the reporters who were employed in House and doing news reports, but people who were providing opinion. Of course, they wanted someone who could actually argue a point. So they didn't want someone who was just basically making statements. So
yourself and Paul Zimmerman were the only English contributors to.
There were a few others. I was a bit different in the sense of the vast majority of the people who were contributing were actually local bloggers in Hong Kong. So these were people who were essentially contributing as they contribute on their blog. I don't actually have a blog. I'm not very good with technology, unfortunately. I will say I was actually the last of a generation who went through university handwriting essays. So I submitted a handwritten thesis, which I don't think people can do anymore.
No, it's mandatory to be
not me.
Yeah, but Paul was invited. I know there were a few other people who wrote in English who sort of contributed regularly, but I think I was the only person who wrote in this particular way.
And what did you write about?
Well, it was funny. I mean, I was given an open mandate, which was really lovely. I remember when I asked that question, I was sort of saying, well, what is it that you want me to write? And they actually sort of said, well, write whatever you wish. And so I dabble a little bit in drawing and art, and so I wrote some pieces on art. I remember being told that I think Tony was going to go and see.
This is Tony Choi.
This was Tony Choi.
Of, House
That's
News.
right, and I remember Tony was going to, I think, see an exhibition that was opening up on the pre-Raphaelite. So, someone sort of said, oh, Evan, why don't you write something on the pre-Raphaelite movement? Which is kind of amusing, because actually it's an artistic, it's an artistic movement I don't particularly like, personally. But at the same time, it is a movement which I think a lot of people they don't realise in actual fact the sheer scope of the movement. I mean, it wasn't just fine art, paintings and things. I mean, there was an intellectual side to it. There was a craft side to it. So I started off writing about art. Started writing also about identity, about things going on in Hong Kong, and I didn't go. I didn't write about politics, but it was.
So you didn't start out that way.
No, not at all. I remember catching up with an old university friend of mine about early this year, so a few months back, and I remember he sort of said, "Oh, I've read some of the things you've said," and apparently it was, sort of doing rounds in China. I guess illegally, but anyway, because house was blocked. But he asked me. He said, I don't remember you being so political in university. So I asked him. I sort of said, well, what do you remember being very important to me? And he sort of said, well, obviously, your identity, and you were someone who always associated with Hong Kong. So I said, well, the way I see it is the same way. I'm writing about my home. I'm writing about my people and the identity of my people, and unfortunately, those issues have become political. So I don't think I've become political. Unfortunately, I think my interests have been made political, and in that way, I found myself sort of having to write either unintentionally writing pieces which were taken as political, or being sort of drawn into some political discussion.
So you think that politics fell on you instead of you falling to politics? To write about it, I mean?
I think so. I can say that the piece I wrote today, which isn't for House, but it will be coming out in a paper next week. Right. The piece is without, I think without doubt, it's something which is political in the sense of it looks at essentially the two extreme political positions that we find in Hong Kong at the moment. But I'm not writing about this because I adhere to one position or another, and I'm certainly not writing about it because I feel very strongly for one political case. But what's happened, I feel, is that unfortunately the politics has become very important in Hong Kong, and I feel that politics has infringed upon the life of people who were outside of politics. And just to give a very good example, I mean, it's shocking when earlier this week I had a game of squash. How innocent is it to go and play sport? And I'm greeted on the MTR with Robert Chow's face, putting forward very clearly one political position. Yeah. I then come out of the MTR, walk into a public sports facility in Hong Kong, and on a TV screen, I'm sold, why a selection committee is good for Hong Kong. In other words, I'm sold another political position. This is an infringement of politics. This is an imposition of politics. Sorry, wrong word. An imposition of politics or of a political position from our own government and from our own establishment. How can we avoid it? So if I write and say, well, even if I try to be apolitical, this is really not the behaviour of authority, of a government to do this.
But as we know that House News, they have a quite strong position for democracy, and they are quite loud about it, and they also support scholarism quite strongly when they started it off. And does it affect you why you choose House News to write your article?
Not at all. I I think writing for House News, before this, and I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, people have asked. I've had people who've come over and said, "Oh, is House in any way sort of connected to Apple Daily or Jimmy Lai?" And I've said, that's not the case at all. And certainly, the editorial line on House was apolitical. I think the reason why it was certainly a platform for a lot of pro-democracy voices was simply because there is a feeling within the media. There's a feeling within the community at the moment that the mainstream media in Hong Kong, if not having become openly establishment they've leaned that way.
Right.
So in some ways, I think a lot of pro-democracy voices who were starved of a platform suddenly found a platform in House. So it wasn't as though House was picking these people. There were pro-establishment writers who were invited to contribute to House as well. They were very open.
When I was talking about some local writer who got rejected by House, that was me, actually.
You got rejected?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, gosh, I feel terrible now. I don't know what to say.
They only accept my article because I write copywriting for them.
Sour grapes. Sour grapes. No wonder you want to sit in this interview.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. How was your experience at House? Like overall with staff, with any editorial, infringement on your work or not, or anything?
No, it wasn't at all. I mean, I will state that my connection with House. I generally speaking would go in and I would meet one editor once a week, and occasionally I would come along and see how things were going. I think personally I'm not really someone who kind of likes to be in big crowds and I certainly have. I try to keep my own independence, but House to me was something I felt on principle. I wanted to support. I can say when I was writing for House, there were certainly other options that came up, other opportunities. But my feeling was House was the platform where I wanted to contribute to, and I wanted to be associated with them because unlike, let's say, a newspaper where you talk about really sort of selecting the views and really having an editorial line, House was actually, I think, very, very democratic, and in that way, I think it represented really sort of the voice of the people in a way in which sort of no other sort of news platform does.
So how is House News separate from, let's say, Apple Daily, which is also considered a voice for the pro-democracy camp? And
well, I think it's chalk and cheese. I mean, Apple Daily has a position. It's owned by someone who has a very clear, open position. Apple Daily is the people who contribute to Apple Daily are generally speaking, staff, and they have an agenda of their own. House had no agenda. House
very
was
apolitical.
It was totally apolitical. Again, and this is the thing which I actually think is quite revealing, that a platform which was totally apolitical and totally open to all sides of the argument could be seen as being so pro-democracy. That in itself says something about the state of free press in Hong Kong.
But in the statement of Tony Choi when their website closed down, it seems that he was undergoing some political pressure. If the platform like that is so apolitical, then why would he undergoing this kind of a political pressure?
Well, before that, what was the lead up to the closure? I mean, in your experience, let's say the 2 weeks before its closure, how was the atmosphere at House News, meeting Tony Choi and your editor. Did you feel an air has changed about the place, or is it just business as usual?
Well. If you don't mind, I might extend that a little bit more than 2 weeks.
Sure.
I think one thing that was very positive was at the end of June, House News had it had its bloggers party. It had a party to celebrate its second anniversary, and it was I was there. I was there with two friends, and as usual we kind of stuck away in a corner and talked for quite a long time. Several hours, but the atmosphere was very good. I mean, I remember actually sort of speaking to Tony. I introduced Tony to one of my friends who was visiting Hong Kong, and I think everything was very positive. I mean, the whole feeling at the time was that House News had done 2 years, and they were very much looking forward to what they would accomplish in the, not in the following year, but in the following several years.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember that 1 month before they closed it down, and they also make a video and post it on YouTube featuring some columnists and one of his views, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It seems that they're still looking forward to develop and to promote their blogger. Or
for sure. A month before they shut down, there was a video that was launched. There was a whole lot of photos. I'm quite afraid usually of photos, but they actually managed to capture me, and it's amazing what they can do with Photoshop these days as well. So everything was positive. I mean, they'd invested in people who were seen as sort of their leading bloggers or their leading writers who had a bit of a following. They wanted to sort of raise the profile of these people. There was certainly a lot of discussion of deals that were on. I remember speaking to one of the editors and asking specifically about advertising, because I was aware that there was an issue at the beginning of the year when a deal that
and they had 300,000 clicks a week.
300 plus, yeah.
Wow.
So no, a day.
A day.
Yeah.
That's over. Wow. I forget that.
Yeah, this is why we talk about our blog. I was like, okay.
Yeah. No, it's just, we got to start somewhere, like I always say. But yeah, I mean, other websites would kill for 300,000 clicks in this city.
Well, I can tell you, there's a piece I wrote on the Cantonese language that if I was to go through my inbox and just count up the number of emails that came in from response to that, and again, I'm not someone on Facebook or someone who's very connected, it would probably be about 2,000. And I've had, I was very surprised when an intern at a local think tank came round to interview me about a month ago. And he walked in and he suddenly said, "I knew you're the one who wrote that essay." And then I said, "Oh, which one?" He says, "You're the one who wrote the Cantonese essay." So I said, "Oh, you've read it?" And he was I think he was a student at Harvard, and he was like, "It's going around the campus. Everyone in Boston's reading it."
Wow.
So I was sort of sitting there like going,
worldwide reach.
Wow, that was quite good, and I certainly had people from all over the world sort of contacting me about that. Yeah. So House definitely, I think, had an audience, and I think people, it was respected in a way in which dare I say, sort of Apple is not.
Apple's more sensationalized.
Absolutely,
that's the label it gets.
That's why I love it.
Where they're saying that House News was trying to be the Huffington Post of Hong Kong.
Yep.
Thing is, Huffington Post has big money behind it as well. Big money. I mean, AOL, George Soros, that's big money. So when they say, well, we'll get back to the business model, but what was your initial reaction when you saw the sudden closure? And the sudden closure was a letter by Tony Choi on the website, the site completely inaccessible for past articles. I mean, everything was wiped except for this one letter. And, it was. You want to talk about sudden death. That's the definition of it.
Well, it was funny. I mean, in the end of June, things were very positive. people had even. I remember when asking specifically about advertising. I was told by several people that they were sort of saying, well, it's we understand we're operating in a bit of a distorted market, but they said, well, look, we've got the three biggest brands in Hong Kong. We've got BMW, Audi, and Mercedes. So things were certainly looking up. I know there were sort of certainly rumours. I mean, I'm sure you know about the Wall Street Journal deal. So there was
a Ming Pao deal as well.
There was a connection with Ming Pao right from the very beginning, because a lot of people came over from Ming Pao.
I see.
But there were a lot of positive signs. I do know certainly though that at the end of June we were some of the people who I spoke to in house. There was first of all, we were very shocked with the turnout for the referendum. Privately, we were sort of sitting there thinking, well, we hope it gets to about 100,000. Really, that would be great. Of course, the turnout just blew everyone away. And again, I've got to stress this. Unlike the current poll that very clearly has gone out simply to make numbers. I mean, I think the referendum was there.
The signature campaign.
The signature campaign.
Right.
That's right. The referendum was there. Obviously, you want people to get involved, but it wasn't there in order just to make up as many numbers as you can. I mean, I think people would have been very happy with 100,000. Of course, when it came back that 800,000 people,
800,000 Hong Kong permanent residents.
Yep.
Real people that live here, work here, and everything. Where the signature campaign is a free for all.
Well, there's nothing in place to stop double voting.
No. Which they accused the referendum of being that you could hijack it and have double voting. We could use a SIM card from 7-Eleven and put in another vote and everything. Yeah, somebody's going to pay $50 each time just to do that.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, another great irony was that I remember sort of Robert Chow accusing Occupy of manipulating children. But of course,
children can vote, sign for this one.
That's right, and of course they couldn't in the other. And what's appalling is that they allow young people. They go into villages where people are apolitical, who can't read, who don't know what's going on. They've been bringing in they've been bringing tourists in. I mean, frankly, if someone came over to me and sort of said, okay, here are the 4 questions. Do you support peace? That sounds reasonable. Yeah. Do you support democracy? Yes. Are you against violence? Yes. Are you against Occupy? Well, I don't know this Occupy, but the other 3 sound very reasonve to me.
Yeah. 3 out of 4 must be good too.
That's. I mean. I think I've actually written about this. I'm really upset because I feel that, and again, I'm not being political. I'm not being against them. But
you're calling a spade a spade.
That's what I feel. I kind of have to do, and I'm doing that because I think as a concerned person who lives in Hong Kong, who sees my children, I see my children in Hong Kong. I hope my grandchildren grow up in Hong Kong. I'm concerned. I'm really concerned when this type of politics happens.
And well, according to Robert Chow, their campaign's better because it's more noble. Anyways, that's a quote, by the way. Did House discuss any other sort of funding other than advertising?
Oh, there was. I mean, House was very, very clear with money. I mean, even when a piece was put up there and they had received any sort of favourable gift, it was all transparent. I mean, it actually came out on the site. So House was actually very, very careful with how they got their money. I mean, I think they wanted to really sort of play, whiter than white. Regarding the actual financing, I don't know the details. I'm not that way involved.
But they were quite transparent with where their funding was coming from.
They were, and I think
better than pan-Democrats. No, I'm joking.
Of course, the question we should then ask is oh yes, it's interesting that Jimmy Lai is account has been hacked. But of course, so who has hacked it? And
nobody's asking the obvious question. The 80-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
Somebody ask it. What are you doing here? Who hacked it?
And again, I asking that question. Why has asking that question suddenly become a political question?
It's not as sensational as going after Jimmy Lai, the supposed CIA agent. But anyways, we will get to that.
But I
think
think,
a whole section on it.
But I think coming back to House, I suppose in a nutshell, at the end of June, finances seem to not be an issue. At the end of June, beginning of July, when there was the referendum, there was certainly talk that just the sheer number of people would force some form of reaction. There was an expectation that July the 1st would be very big. In actual fact, July the 1st was the last time I saw Tony.
How was he?
He was good. He was with his family. We had lunch in Pacific Place. But there was an expectation that because so many people had clearly mobilized really around this position, that there would be a reaction. And there was certainly that there was talk of House needing to be prepared for that reaction. So I use the word pressure. I think there was an expectation that certain pressure would be applied, and the feeling was we have to prepare for this, and it's very simple. Pressure is applied to certain people in Hong Kong, and a lot of those people have connections with House, and it's not as though House didn't know what may have been thrown at them. And at the time, that's all I knew. In early July, my computer was hacked.
Your Gmail.
Yeah. And then I mentioned it, and I know it was reported to House, and I did notice that certainly about 2 weeks before the closure, things became very, very guarded. So, whilst in the past, in actual fact, I had some information that had been passed on to me, which I wanted to pass on to someone at House to sort of follow up. And it was interesting that, I was actually told not to go in and not to pass the information over. How this was communicated was quite shocking. It was. I was asked for lunch, which was fine.
Tong restaurant.
Yeah, so we had something out for lunch, and whilst we were talking, things were just written down and handwritten notes, and they were just passed over to me.
And one said Storm.
It had Storm. It had it's Insecure. Crackdown. I mean, there were no details. What I felt at the time was...
When you saw this, what was going through your mind?
Well, to be honest, I mean,
I saw Storm, Crackdown, and Not Secure, I'd be looking over my shoulder.
I know, you sort of sit there and you're like going...
CIA, Chinese security agents or something.
That's right, it's like a Cold War film.
Yeah, exactly.
But when I got it, I mean, my feeling was okay, maybe it's just being played up a bit, and
you think their officers were bugged?
Well,
put
it this way:
out there?
for the last, really for about the last year, there's been people who've been going around and sort of saying, oh, there's people have been setting honey traps and all of this. You sort of sit there and it's rumours. You don't pay much attention to it.
Right.
And of course, when it happened, the way I saw it was okay. Well. The surveillance is happening. There's a bit of pressure that's being applied. This is what was expected. So, honestly, I thought no big deal.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. If it was me, I'd just be like,
I would
okay.
just say X-Men Storm.
Well,
you think?
Maybe. I mean, there's. I don't want to go into all the things I've done in my life, but I can tell you I've been shot at by 3 different types of firearms. A
musket? No, I'm joking.
No, not a musket. But
well, he said 3 different. Must be very unique.
Well,
that's a different interview.
That's another
interview.
Story.
Yeah.
But my feeling at the time was, okay, there's obviously a degree of surveillance that's going on here, and we just need to sort of step back a bit.
Any media operation would be. I mean,
absolutely.
There's got to be some expectation of we're being watched one way or another.
Yep.
Your email was hacked, and just a side note, I don't know why people are using Gmail, Yahoo, for secret information. There are secure email like Hush Mail, Start Mail's coming out, Proton Mail's coming out. We got some alternatives thanks to Edward Snowden coming out. So. Journalists, writers, please do not use Gmail, Yahoo, or Hotmail to communicate.
At least encrypt it.
And if it's really sensitive, meet in a parking lot.
But I didn't think there was anything sensitive. I mean, sitting and writing something that just sort of says, well, Cantonese is not a useless language in Hong Kong. I mean, if that's political and if that gets people wanting to snoop on you, then again, the elephant in the room is to ask why. What is wrong with it?
Didn't you have a feeling of asking right there, like at least write down on a note, what the hell is going on? Or did you just say, I'll just ask another time?
No, I mean, we had spoken about, there was an anticipation that pressure would be applied. So, my feeling, and I have to admit, Tony... Tony's a nice guy, and he's a very capable, he's a very savvy guy, and I had every confidence that
they'll weather the storm.
Yeah, you'd weather the storm, and of course that was the last I'd heard, and then you had the closure, and of course the interesting thing was, there were little things going about, but things that were being said, and you. Put in the perspective of okay, an anticipated pressure is being applied. You don't see those things as being particularly a real concern. Now, of course, as soon as it closed, and it was totally unexpected, complete sudden closure. People were not informed; it just happened, and it closed. And this was again the strange thing. You would have the South China Morning Post the very next day reporting the closure of House in a very small little article, tiny little blurb, by just saying House, a pro-democracy news site, closed because it ran an unsustainable business model. And you read the actual statement Tony put up, and he starts off with, "I fear."
Yeah.
I
mean, it was
there's a mixture of 2 things.
Yeah.
Bad business model plus I fear. Right, and again, getting back to Key's original point, that I apologize for cutting you off, but like you said, it was apolitical, but the pressure came down on House. Could it be that because it was bringing both sides, undecideds, pro-democracy, pro-establishment, together to think, maybe we should compromise on this, maybe we should compromise on that, because that can be more dangerous to the establishment than having 2 polarized camps. Bringing people together is worse for somebody who wants control than having 2 sides you could referee and play them off each other. Could that be why they... Speculation,
It is speculative. It's interesting you should say that, because I'm actually drafting an essay making that very same point. Again, we have to really stress that this is completely speculative. But, my feeling is that House was targeted because it had a respectability that Apple didn't have. And, I feel that... the interesting thing is... House closing wasn't just a case of pressure being applied. If pressure was expected, surely what was applied was beyond what was expected. Now, again, without knowing any of the details, I think that's very concerning. Now, let's be frank. I'm no fan of, all political systems have their problems.
Of course, yes.
And
no perfect system.
And in all political systems, there are pressures,
Right.
and being playing the game, you assume a certain level, and you assume these pressures. Now, what's very worrying in Hong Kong has had its pressures. I actually think, some of those pressures can be really quite intense. But if my feeling is something spooked Tony,
and he has businesses on the mainland.
He does. There's many ways we can speculate, but again, without wanting to go into any detail, because I certainly don't want to say anything which is untrue. But talking in generals, if something spooked him, if a degree of pressure that we have not seen in Hong Kong was applied to him to force him to close, then that should actually be a very, very important. That should concern Hong Kong. That should concern everyone involved in politics in Hong Kong.
Would it have not been better then to make it public? To make what he's going through public?
The degree...
Or do you think people would just say, these pro-democracy people, pro-democracy, are just trying to, drum stuff up that's not true or whatever? Or because usually when you put stuff out in the open, it backs off those people that are doing it because they've kind of been exposed,
Yeah, well, we have just, in the last year in Hong Kong, I mean, we've seen violence come into politics in a big way.
Yes.
Obviously Kevin Lau was stabbed.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to tell me that if Kevin Lau received something that was threatening, and if he came out and made a public statement and said, "Well, this is what's happened," that would have prevented him from being stabbed? That would have. Well, if it wasn't Kevin Lau, maybe people close to you. Now, again, this is speculative. I don't know. I don't know why. It's obviously it's Tony's decision, and I have enough respect for Tony to say, he's not a naive man. He's not an unintelligent man. He's a man who I think is very considered. He's a man who I think is very meticulous in planning and in doing his homework.
Mm-hmm.
If he felt uncomfortable going public with this, if he felt that he at best could just resort to such generalizations as "I fear," and make mentions of white terror and many other things, I think there's a reason for that.
Okay. Have you yourself received any threats, veiled or direct at all?
No. I mean, you get the usual.
What do you mean by usual? Probably not.
No. Sorry. I mean, I was about to say, you get the odd person who sends you. I've got quite a lot of mail from people who were saying I have no right to talk or to write about Hong Kong because I write in English. Of course.
Hey, last time I checked, the basic law said English is an official language here.
Well, of course, the interesting thing is, Cantonese was removed as an official language because it was classified as a dialect.
Oh.
But
so is English a dialect?
Well, it's but you get nut jobs.
Yeah.
So
for anything,
you get nut jobs.
You will get people that just hate because they want to hate.
Yeah.
They have their set view, and nothing can change whatever it's going to be, and we just ignore them. What else, and move on.
So how would you move on now?
What's your future?
Yeah.
Future's fine for me. I mean, I write, but one can't just. I think if you just write off the top of your head, then you're pretty egotistical. So I mean there are many other things. I've for many years now I've been doing interviews with around the community to try and sort of keep. I suppose keep my hand on the pulse, and I'm at the moment I'm working on a research project, which hopefully will be launching at the end of September. So I'm kind of busy doing that, and writing wise, I mean, to be frank, I think with House closing, it just means those other opportunities that were there now open up, and obviously I have to consider possibly going or taking up those other opportunities. So I don't think it won't affect me. It won't affect my lifestyle, but obviously the closure of House, I think, has affected me. It's affected the way I suppose I know it sounds really awful, but I think with House closing, a little bit of hope. There's, if you don't mind me digressing a bit, there's a friend of mine put it so wonderfully. He's a sinologist who's writing for a German paper, and he was in Hong Kong just before July the 1st doing a report on the protest that was coming up, and I remember him sort of saying, oh well, the thing is, in Hong Kong there is a tension. There's an undeniable tension, and there is also an undeniable sense of unhappiness, a sense of concern about the future. There are big problems. There really are. That's very, very obvious. And it's Hong Kong is not like it was a few years ago. But then he said, however, there's also a hope. So people are moaning and they're complaining and they're concerned and they're worried. But there's also, that Hong Kong spirit, that sort of sense of, yes, these are big obstacles, but we'll find a way around it.
Hong Kong usually does.
Hong Kong usually does.
What makes us unique.
And I think House was a great expression of that. In actual fact, he said he felt that House really sort of manifested that sense of hope. And he really, maybe he's more sensitive to these things. He really was sort of saying, with House and seeing how how people responded to House, seeing how people really took House to heart. I mean, I think for a lot of people, House News wasn't just another news source and they're just switching over. It was a sense of, this is kind of my news source. There was something. There was, I think, a stronger bond, and for House to have closed in the circumstances that it is, of course, it knocks a bit of a. It certainly puts a dent in that hope.
So what about your thoughts on the future of online news in Hong Kong? Do you think this opens up an opportunity? Well, I guess some others are already trying to fill the void with this new one coming in called Citizens News.
And the local press and VJ media. And
all of a sudden, they see
in media as well.
They think they can probably do better with a better business model. I don't know. I'm just, saying. But the thing with Citizens is that half of it's going to be business news, and the other half is going to be contributing bloggers from all sides. So, what is that? Where does that put media? Are they now seeing that they don't want to step on toes that they don't want to step on, or is it just that, we think this is a better business model, or where's this going in your opinion with the future of online?
Well, I think I should first of all start by saying that I think if you're talking about businesses online and things, I'm really probably the last person on earth you should be speaking to. But I mean, I think if I was to give just again a very personal, might be a very stupid and unfounded opinion, but I think it's very easy to sort of say, oh well, we can launch a lot of other things and things will come up, and I'm sure that will happen, but House was, House had basically reached a level of certainly a size and sophistication, which I think would be very difficult to match. I'm not saying it won't happen, but certainly it will take time for these new platforms to, I think, reach that. And my worry actually is that with House closing, and again, it was very funny because it was such big such big news in the Chinese papers. There was speculation about, I had people phoning up saying, do you know what happened to Tony? He disappeared for 4 days. And I said, of course, I turned around and I said, well, you read that in Apple Daily, didn't you? So I've got no other comments.
I was going to ask about where did he go?
But I think there is a reaction now that many people are coming together saying, we have to fill this void. My concern, of course, is that it's very easy to control lots of very small players, and what I would prefer to see, of course, is that all of this energy come together in one ship, and one ship that I think is launched with the expectation of it launching at a certain level of respectability, and I'm not sure if that's
can be replicated like House News did.
That can be replicated in that sort of way. I really hope so, and I hope I'm proved wrong. Really am.
Well, what about English news in Hong Kong? What is your thoughts on the future of that? Because for us, we think it's very bleak.
Yeah,
and it's the reason we started this podcast. We needed to fill some voids.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I probably will be receiving a check from South China Morning Post. So
good that you declare interest first.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but
I'm not saying criticize anybody, but I mean, examples. RTHK just let go of Gary Pullard, a very respectable Hong Kong, English media veteran, not renewing his contract, and the excuse is you're too old. The same thing with Francis Moriarty. The same thing. It's an excuse to get rid of these, and they're not filling the position.
No, we've seen this. Look at South China Morning Post. They've been doing this for the last couple of years.
A lot of veterans are let go there.
They're letting the veterans off. They're not. I mean, the scary thing here is, of course, for certainly some of them, they're not even really. They're not even giving them the opportunity to continue to contribute to the Post.
Right.
Which is very
I guess
worrying.
post something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm in good company when I say this, but I'm sure we know many journalists at South China Morning Post who have very real concerns. I'm sure we know people who have left who have very, very real concerns. I think in some ways what's happened in South China Morning Post has mirrored what's happened in the press in general in Hong Kong, and there's that sense of it has leaned. It has leaned towards the establishment view. It has leaned towards Beijing. And am I confident? I mean, the big problem Hong Kong has is that, unlike in if you were serving the Chinese market, where you've got a large enough market to sustain. I mean, there's are you going to get 300,000?
No,
viewers?
Absolutely not. But I mean, we're talking RTHK government funded. It's not like they're running in the free market. They're just funded by public money. So what is their? I mean, this
is the same government which, and again, if we want to really talk about the changing values in Hong Kong, don't talk to me about young people becoming disrespectful and becoming troublemakers. Anyone who says young people are lazy, I'll just say, go to a Hong Kong school, see how damn hard they work.
Absolutely.
If someone was to sort of say, are young people disrespectful? I will say, well, go and sit in a family. Even when youngsters share have the opposite political viewpoint of their parents. Of course, the usual thing is the parents are quite happy to take gifts from the DAB, and that sets their political viewpoint for life.
You love oyster sauce.
I love oyster sauce.
I want a lunchbox myself. Yeah.
But politics has never brought up Hong Kong. The young people in Hong Kong are tremendously respectful. They in many ways, I think, carry forward the best values of the older generation. But at the same time, they relate to Hong Kong differently.
Mm.
If we want to talk about really changing values in Hong Kong, look at our government. Could you imagine our government? I don't know, 15 years ago, being so openly political. Could you imagine the chief executive going out and taking part in this petition? Of course, he turns around.
We're talking about a person, though, that's so, I don't know if narcissism is his issue. I just think he just thinks that whatever he does is the correct way, where opposing voices, he's listening to him, but is he learning anything? Probably not. And a lot of people have confirmed this, that he just doesn't listen. Anyways, that's a whole different topic again.
I think the word is righteous.
He might think he's righteous. Correct. And just finally, is there any way for people to reach you, or anything people should look forward to in the future from coming from you? Apparently,
again, some of the people at the house are so nice. I was told today that a personal blog has been set up and will be run by some former house people for me.
Oh, wonderful!
So I'm sure what I write could still be accessed that way. I know. I think there'll still be links from the house blog that goes there. And I'll be writing a bit for Asia Sentinel, for hopefully SCMP occasionally. Interesting enough, even China Daily, I'll be writing. I'll be contributing pieces there. I think.
Are there any online media that are approaching you to ask you for contribution?
But I kind of would like to go with just a few. There have been people who have sort of said, "Oh, would you be interested?" And some of them I hadn't heard of. But I think I would rather just go with a few which I kind of know that it's going out that way.
That'll reach a certain percentage.
And anyway, again, I was just so shocked with some of the essays I wrote. It was amazing. It just seems as though if you hit a nerve, it's almost as wherever you're published, if you do hit a nerve, it just spreads. It just goes viral, so many people read it. So I'm sure if I do hit a nerve, then it will find its way to your mailbox somehow.
Well, I just want to close this off by saying that it's unfortunate that House News is closed permanently, and that this type of atmosphere has come upon Hong Kong, that where before it was you could have your opinion without impunity pretty much, and now intimidation is setting upon, and also financial reasons. Do you want to step on some toes? It might suddenly you'll see a surprise inspection at your mainland facility or whatever, and you might worry about that. A lot of people have to worry about stepping on toes. Even at CMP, there's a Malaysian business person that owns it, but has a lot of connections to the mainland market, and of course you don't want to step on the wrong toes. You don't want to anger the wrong people, and so you kind of just stay there in limbo. Not as far as I can tell with SCMP, it's quality is not what it used to be, and reflects in the writing. To be honest, that's just my personal opinion. And future of English media is bleak, especially with all this happening at RTHK. That's why we had this idea to start this podcast. There's got to be a void filled. We're not making any money off of this. This is just a service. This is just right now. This is eventually maybe if it's popular enough, we'll do something, make it bigger. Use the funds to make it bigger. That's the idea. But right now, we just want to fill the void, get interesting guests, get a different view on things, because if these shows such as In Conversation, The Pulse, The Works, all these quality shows, that if they don't come back, who's going to fill the void? And, I just hope that we can just be a part of that. Evan, you can also be a part of that. And more people need to just... Real Hong Kong news online. Hong Rong, a blog. I mean, there are people trying to fill that void. And that gives me some optimism for the future of Hong Kong English media. And I just hope people don't cower to fear. There are always going to be people threatening you. There are going to be razor blades in the mail. I mean, it's happened throughout history, and of course it just depends on what your tolerance level is for certain threats. Me, it's like whatever, for now until it hits home. But right now, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. And that's how I feel. How about you, Keith?
I just think people should use secure email.
Oh, yeah, of course. Do not use Gmail.
I wish someone had given me that advice a while ago. That would have been very nice.
There are alternatives. Check out Hushmail and eventually Startmail and ProtonMail. All of them are very secure and have encryption. And even if somebody wants to hack in, they'll have to go through. It'll take them forever just to decrypt one email.
Yeah.
All right. And I'd like to know, with the millionaire that is Jimmy Lai, how his assistant didn't know that.
Well, they
we'll get into that. We'll get into that. We have a whole second half coming through. This is a extended edition of Eye on Hong Kong. And again, I'd like to thank Evan for being on the show to discuss house news. And Evan, would you like to stick around for the second half?
I'm happy to. And then, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Next week we will have another guest, somebody from RTHK, and we'll reveal that later in the week.
Cool.
So stick around for the second half.